When we think of the golden age of Hollywood, we picture pure magic. We see larger-than-life stars, perfect and glamorous, living in a world of black and white elegance. They were icons, legends on the silver screen, delivering powerful performances in timeless classics. They seemed so serious, so focused, and so incredibly sophisticated. But what if I told you that behind the camera, when the director yelled, "Cut," these sophisticated stars were often just big, silly kids looking for a laugh? Away from the spotlight, some of the biggest names in Hollywood history were also the biggest pranksters, turning movie sets into their personal playgrounds. They loved to break the tension, get a reaction, and remind everyone that movies were supposed to be fun. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to reveal the secret, hilarious side of 15 Golden Age legends who were secretly the biggest troublemakers and jokesters on set. 1. Clark Gable, the king of goofballs. Let's start with the undisputed king of Hollywood himself, Clark Gable. On screen, he was the ultimate tough guy, the charming hero, the man who commanded attention in epics like Gone with the Wind. You would think a man with that much star power would be serious and maybe a little intimidating all the time. But you would be completely wrong. Clark Gable was a giant kid at heart, and he absolutely loved playing practical jokes, especially on his close friends. His favorite target was another Hollywood legend, Spencer Tracy. Gable knew that Tracy took great pride in his collection of fancy, expensive cars. So, one day, Gable spotted a completely wrecked, beat-up old car, a real piece of junk that looked like it was one bump away from falling apart. He bought it for almost nothing. The prank was just beginning. Gable had this old clunker delivered to the MGM studio lot, right where everyone could see it. For the final touch, he tied a giant, beautiful red ribbon around it. Then he called Spencer Tracy over and with a huge smile told him that he had a special early Christmas present waiting for him outside. Tracy, expecting something incredible from the King of Hollywood, walked out to find this heap of rust and metal. But the joke wasn't over. Gable had already gone through the trouble of having the car's title and keys legally transferred into Tracy's name. This meant that Spencer Tracy was now the official owner of this piece of garbage and was legally responsible for having it towed off the studio property. It was a prank that was both incredibly silly and a huge, annoying headache. A classic Gable move that showed his playful, mischievous spirit. 2. Humphrey Bogart, the master of mayhem. Humphrey Bogart was the king of cool, with a cigarette hanging from his lip. He played cynical detectives and tough-as-nails adventurers who never seemed to crack a smile unless they were being sarcastic. He was the star of Casablanca and the Maltese Falcon, the ultimate on-screen cynic. But the real Bogart was anything but serious. He believed that acting was a silly way for a grown man to make a living, so he made sure to have as much fun as possible while doing it. Bogart formed a group of friends he called the Bogart Players, and their main goal was to cause chaos wherever they went, especially on set. One of his signature moves was simple but effective: noise. He loved to hide loud buzzers and alarms all over the set, especially on the chairs of his co-stars or even the director. His favorite target for pranks was the legendary director John Huston. During the filming of The African Queen, which was shot in the hot, miserable jungles of Africa, Bogart decided to lighten the mood. The movie starred him and the very proper Katharine Hepburn. In many scenes, Bogart's character was supposed to be drinking gin from a bottle. But for the scenes he filmed with Huston, Bogart secretly filled the prop bottles with actual gin instead of water. He would then offer the director a drink, knowing Huston would accept. The two would end up genuinely drunk during filming, much to the confusion of Katharine Hepburn, who couldn't understand why they were acting so giddy and unprofessional. Bogart's pranks were his way of fighting back against the boredom and stress of movie making, proving that even the coolest man in Hollywood had a silly side. 3. Spencer Tracy, the quiet prankster. While Spencer Tracy was often the victim of Clark Gable's elaborate jokes, he was more than capable of dishing them out himself. On screen, Tracy was known for his incredible acting ability, his serious and grounded performances that won him 2 academic awards. He seemed like a quiet, thoughtful man who took his craft very seriously. And he did, but he also had a hidden mischievous streak. He didn't go for big, loud pranks like Gable. Instead, Tracy was a master of the subtle, psychological joke that would slowly drive his co-stars crazy. He loved to play with people's minds and make them question their own sanity. During the filming of the movie Father of the Bride with Elizabeth Taylor, Tracy noticed that she was often tired and would try to sneak in little naps between takes. She would find a quiet corner of the set, lie down on a couch, and drift off to sleep. Tracy saw his opportunity. Whenever he saw Taylor sleeping, he would signal for the entire film crew, the cameramen, the lighting guys, the sound engineers, to quietly pick up all of their heavy equipment and move it to a completely different part of the soundstage. When Elizabeth Taylor would wake up, she would be completely alone in an empty part of the studio. For a moment, she would be totally confused, wondering if she had slept for hours and if the entire movie production had left without her. It was a quiet, clever prank that perfectly matched Spencer Tracy's understated but brilliant personality. 4. Katharine Hepburn, the elegant troublemaker. Katharine Hepburn was Hollywood royalty. She was elegant, fiercely independent, and a powerhouse actress with a record 4 Oscar wins for Best Actress. She carried herself with an air of sophistication and intelligence, playing strong-willed women who were always the smartest people in the room. But behind that classy exterior was a woman who loved a good, chaotic prank. She was an athletic and adventurous person, and her jokes often involved a bit of physical comedy. She was a close friend of Spencer Tracy, and while they had incredible chemistry on screen, they also had a playful rivalry off-screen, constantly trying to one-up each other with practical jokes. One of their most famous films together was Adam's Rib. In one scene, Spencer Tracy's character was supposed to be getting a massage. As he lay face down on the massage table, ready for the scene to begin, Hepburn saw her chance. She quietly snuck up behind him and with a running start took a huge leap and landed directly on his back, knocking the wind out of him completely. Tracy let out a huge grunt and the entire crew burst into laughter. It was a completely unexpected and physical prank that perfectly captured Hepburn's fearless and fun-loving spirit. She proved that even the most respected and elegant actress in Hollywood wasn't above a little bit of good-natured roughhousing to get a laugh. 5. Paul Newman, the king of escalation. Paul Newman, with his famous blue eyes and incredible talent, was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He was known for his cool, laid-back charm in films like Cool Hand Luke and The Hustler. But when it came to pranks, he was far from laid back. Newman was legendary for his practical jokes, which were often elaborate, expensive, and part of long-running prank wars with his friends and co-stars. His most famous prank rival was the director George Roy Hill, who directed him in The Sting and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Their prank war became the stuff of Hollywood legend, with each man trying to top the other in a series of increasingly outrageous stunts. It all started when George Roy Hill had Newman's brand new, very expensive sports car taken apart and delivered to his dressing room, piece by piece. Newman, not one to be outdone, decided to get his revenge. He found out where the director was keeping his own car and had it secretly towed away. A few days later, he invited George Roy Hill to a special screening. As the director sat in the theater, the movie began to play, but instead of the film, it was footage of his car being crushed into a tiny metal cube at a junkyard. The director was horrified, thinking his car was destroyed. Newman let him suffer for a few minutes before revealing that he had actually used a different, identical car for the prank, and that his real car was safe. Newman's pranks were epic productions, showing that he was willing to go to incredible lengths just for the sake of a joke. 6. Marlon Brando, the rebel prankster. Marlon Brando changed acting forever. He was intense, moody, and brought a new level of realism to his roles in films like A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. He was known as a Hollywood rebel, someone who played by his own rules and didn't care what anyone thought of him. That rebellious attitude extended to his behavior on set, where he was a notorious prankster who loved to shock people and disrupt the serious atmosphere of a movie production. He believed that sets were too tense and that a little bit of silliness was necessary to keep everyone grounded. His pranks were often childish, but they almost always worked to break the tension. His most legendary prank occurred during the filming of the very serious and dramatic movie, The Godfather. In the famous opening scene, Brando, as Don Corleone, is supposed to be holding a cat while he listens to a man's request. During one of the rehearsals, Brando decided the cat wasn't funny enough. So, he secretly filled his pants with weights. When the other actors in the scene had to lift him to carry him upstairs, they were expecting him to be a normal weight. Instead, they struggled and nearly fell over, unable to lift the surprisingly heavy movie star. Brando also famously used a remote-controlled fart machine, which he would hide on set and set off during serious, emotional scenes, causing his co-stars to burst out laughing and ruin the take. For Brando, a good laugh was always more important than a perfect scene. 7. Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the prank. Frank Sinatra was the leader of the Rat Pack, the coolest group of entertainers on the planet. He was a legendary singer and a talented actor with an Oscar to his name. On stage and on screen, he had an aura of power and control. He was the chairman of the board. But when he was with his friends, he was the ringleader of a gang of pranksters. The entire Rat Pack, including Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., turned Las Vegas and Hollywood movie sets into their personal playground. Sinatra was often the mastermind behind their elaborate schemes, which were designed to cause as much friendly chaos as possible. When the Rat Pack was filming the original Ocean's 11, they were all staying at the same hotel in Las Vegas. Sinatra decided to have some fun with his co-star, Peter Lawford. He and the other members of the Rat Pack snuck into Lawford's hotel room while he was out and completely redecorated it. They turned all the furniture upside down, glued the telephone to the cradle, and sawed the legs off the chairs so they would collapse the moment he sat on them. They even rerouted the plumbing so the shower would spray water all over the bathroom. Lawford returned to find his room in a state of total, surreal chaos. For Sinatra and his friends, life was meant to be a party, and pranks were just part of the fun. 8. Dean Martin, the effortlessly funny man. Dean Martin was the definition of cool. With a drink in one hand and a smile on his face, he made everything look easy, whether he was singing, acting, or telling a joke. He was a key member of the Rat Pack and a frequent partner in crime for Frank Sinatra's pranks. But Dean had his own unique style of humor. He loved to play the part of the charming, clumsy goofball, both on and off screen. His pranks were often more subtle and performance-based than Sinatra's, relying on his incredible comedic timing and his ability to make people believe he was just a lovable, bumbling fool. One of his favorite running gags happened during the Rat Pack's famous live shows in Las Vegas. In the middle of Frank Sinatra's performance, when he was singing a serious, emotional ballad, Dean Martin would stumble out from backstage dressed as a waiter. He would be carrying a tray full of glasses and drinks, and he would pretend to be completely lost and clumsy. He would trip over cables, bump into musicians, and make a huge racket, all while Sinatra tried desperately to keep a straight face and continue singing. The audience would be in stitches, and the prank worked every time because Dean Martin was so convincing as the clueless waiter. It was a perfect example of his brand of humor, gentle, hilarious, and designed to make his friends the center of the joke. 9. Alfred Hitchcock, the director of deception. Alfred Hitchcock was the master of suspense, a director who terrified audiences with his psychological thrillers like Psycho and The Birds. He was a meticulous planner, a genius who controlled every single detail of his films to create the maximum amount of tension and fear. But he also had a very dark and twisted sense of humor, and he was infamous for playing cruel and unusual pranks on his actors and crew. For Hitchcock, the suspense didn't stop when the cameras stopped rolling. He seemed to enjoy making the people around him feel just as anxious and uncomfortable as his on-screen characters. His pranks were often more mean-spirited than funny. He had a strange phobia of eggs, so he once forced an actress to handle dozens of them, knowing it would make her uncomfortable. His most notorious prank involved a crew member. Hitchcock made a bet with the man that he couldn't spend an entire night chained to a studio camera. The man agreed. Hitchcock then offered him a drink, which he had secretly laced with a powerful laxative. He then handcuffed the man to the camera and left him there for the night. The result was predictable and deeply humiliating for the poor crew member. Hitchcock's pranks were a strange and dark extension of his filmmaking personality, blurring the line between a practical joke and genuine cruelty. 10. Errol Flynn, the Hollywood swashbuckler. Errol Flynn was the original Hollywood action hero. He was the handsome, swashbuckling star of adventures like The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood. On screen, he was a charming rogue who was always ready with a sword and a smile. Off screen, his life was even wilder and more chaotic. Flynn was famous for his hard-partying lifestyle and his complete disregard for rules and authority. He lived his life like one big, crazy adventure, and his pranks were just as wild and unpredictable as he was. They were often crude, shocking, and definitely not for the faint of heart. Flynn had a close and often tumultuous friendship with the actor David Niven. The two were constantly playing pranks on each other. One of Flynn's most infamous pranks was when he decided to place a small, hidden camera inside the guest bathroom of his home. When his friends, including Niven, would use the bathroom, Flynn would secretly film them. It was a shocking invasion of privacy, but for Flynn, it was just a hilarious joke. He also had a fondness for using dead animals in his pranks, often hiding dead snakes or spiders in his co-stars' beds or dressing rooms just to hear them scream. Errol Flynn's pranks were a reflection of his own personality, reckless, outrageous, and completely over the top. 11. Cary Grant, the suave and silly star. Cary Grant was the epitome of style, charm, and sophistication. He was the handsome leading man who was effortlessly witty and graceful in romantic comedies and thrilling dramas alike. He was so perfect on screen that it's hard to imagine him ever being anything but a complete gentleman. But Cary Grant had a wonderfully silly and playful side that he often kept hidden from the public. He didn't go for mean-spirited jokes, but preferred gentle, absurd pranks that would leave his friends feeling more confused than anything else. He loved to play with people's expectations and create bizarre situations just to see how they would react. One of his favorite people to prank was his good friend and co-star, Randolph Scott. Grant and Scott were roommates for a period of time, and Grant took full advantage of the situation. He would often sneak into Scott's room and do something incredibly strange, like replacing all of his shoelaces with cooked spaghetti. Can you imagine waking up, getting dressed for a day at the studio, and finding your expensive leather shoes filled with pasta? Another time, he carefully unraveled every single one of Randolph Scott's socks and then loosely sewed them back together with a single thread, ensuring they would completely fall apart the moment he tried to put them on. Cary Grant's pranks were gentle, weird, and perfectly suited to his charming but quirky personality. 12. James Cagney, the tough guy with a funny bone. James Cagney was one of Hollywood's original tough guys. He shot to fame playing gangsters and hard-nosed characters who wouldn't hesitate to get into a fist fight. He had a unique, explosive energy on screen that made him one of the most watchable stars of his generation. Off-screen, however, Cagney was known as a kind, professional, and surprisingly funny man. He loved to dance, he loved to laugh, and he loved a good practical joke. His pranks weren't meant to be mean, they were his way of keeping the energy on set light and fun, especially during the filming of long and difficult movies. During the making of the classic gangster film, The Public Enemy, there is a famous scene where Cagney violently shoves a grapefruit into the face of his co-star, Mae Clarke. The scene was shocking to audiences at the time. But behind the scenes, Cagney used the grapefruit for a different purpose. Before filming another scene with Clarke, he secretly cut a grapefruit in half and hollowed it out, creating 2 little cups. He then carefully placed them inside the top of her dress like a makeshift bra, without her noticing. When the director called action and Mae Clarke began to say her lines, the 2 grapefruit halves came tumbling out of her dress and rolled across the floor. The entire crew erupted in laughter, and the tension of filming a serious gangster movie was broken, all thanks to James Cagney. 13. Judy Garland, the giggling prankster. Judy Garland is remembered for her incredible, powerful voice and her emotionally raw performances in films like The Wizard of Oz and A Star is Born. She is often seen as a tragic figure, a supremely talented star who battled many personal demons throughout her life. But it's important to remember that she also had a vibrant, fun-loving side. Especially as a young actress at MGM, Judy was known for her infectious giggle and her love of playing pranks with her friends, most notably her frequent co-star, Mickey Rooney. The two were a dynamic duo on screen, and behind the scenes, they were a pair of mischievous troublemakers. Judy and Mickey were the best of friends, and they were constantly trying to make each other laugh during takes. Their favorite prank was simple but incredibly effective. They would try to see who could sneak the most ridiculous, out-of-place word into their dialogue without the director noticing. During a serious scene, Mickey might suddenly talk about a purple platypus, or Judy would mention a fuzzy caterpillar, trying to get the other to break character and start laughing. They also loved to make funny faces at each other from just off camera, causing countless takes to be ruined because they couldn't stop giggling. These simple, innocent pranks were a way for the young stars to cope with the immense pressure of being Hollywood's biggest box office draws. 14. Tony Curtis, the disguise artist. Tony Curtis was a handsome and charismatic star known for his roles in films like Some Like It Hot and the defiant ones. He had a magnetic personality and a great sense of humor that made him a joy to work with. He was also a dedicated prankster who loved to go the extra mile for a joke. His favorite type of prank involved his love for costumes and disguises. He was a master of transformation on screen, and he used those skills to create chaos and confusion off-screen as well. He loved to see the look on people's faces when they realized the strange old man they were talking to was actually the famous movie star Tony Curtis. During the filming of Some Like It Hot, a movie in which he famously dresses in drag, Curtis took his love of disguise to a new level. One day, he came to the set dressed as a frumpy, middle-aged woman who was supposedly a huge fan of his co-star, Jack Lemmon. He put on a wig, glasses, and frumpy clothes and approached Lemmon, asking for his autograph and gushing about how much she loved his work. Jack Lemmon, being a nice guy, politely chatted with the woman for several minutes, completely unaware that he was talking to his own co-star. Curtis kept the act up for as long as he could before finally revealing his true identity, leaving Lemmon completely stunned and the rest of the crew in hysterics. 15. Debbie Reynolds, America's sweetheart and a prankster. Debbie Reynolds was America's sweetheart. With her bubbly personality and girl-next-door charm, she sang and danced her way into the hearts of millions in films like Singin' in the Rain. She was seen as wholesome, sweet, and endlessly cheerful. And while she was genuinely a kind and lovely person, she also had a mischievous and playful side that loved a good prank. She believed that laughter was the best medicine, and she wasn't afraid to go to great lengths to get a laugh from her friends and colleagues, especially from her close friend and frequent prank victim, Frank Sinatra. Debbie knew that Sinatra had a very particular and serious public image, so she decided to have some fun with it. One night, while Sinatra was performing his big show in Las Vegas, Debbie organized a surprise. In the middle of his concert, she arranged for a group of delivery men to march down the main aisle of the theater, carrying a huge, life-sized pizza. They walked right up to the stage and presented it to a completely bewildered Frank Sinatra, right in the middle of a song. Another time, she filled his dressing room from floor to ceiling with thousands of balloons. When he opened the door, an avalanche of color came pouring out. Debbie Reynolds' pranks were always good-natured and full of joy, a perfect reflection of her own sunny and wonderful personality. These stars may have looked like gods on the silver screen, but behind the scenes, they were wonderfully, hilariously human.